Hello and welcome to this episode of the GrowVC Everyone Funding Startups podcast. I'm your host Marcus, and today we're looking at Africa. We started our own operations in Africa several months back, and today we wanted to recap on the process, the feedback that we've got, and where we are today. And today I'm here with Munya Chiura, who's responsible for operations in Africa. So Munya, thanks for being on the podcast again.
Thank you, Marcus. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast.
The reasoning why we wanted to do another podcast, not just to update you all on what we're doing, but rather also inspired by the feedback that we got from the first podcast, because we had such many people that reached out to us and said, what are you doing in Africa? How can I get involved after listening to the podcast? So that's why I wanted to recap. I think it's been has it been about 3 months or so? Maybe something like that from the podcast.
Yeah, it's about 3 months or so.
So, all right, first of all, I just want to touch on a more personal point, because Munya has just moved back to Africa after spending nearly 2 decades in the US. So I wanted to get kind of your summary of the experiences from the move, what it's been like in the past month or so.
Yes, Marcus, I would say that it's a big transition. In many ways, there are things that we take for granted, such as, and especially for me, coming back to Zimbabwe, we have our certain challenges around telecommunications and infrastructure, electricity, and so forth. But I think the biggest transition has really been being so accustomed to everything working so efficiently in the more developed countries, and coming to the developing nations where we certainly have our challenges, as I mentioned, with some of your day-to-day infrastructure challenges. Having said that, it's also been quite exciting and equally exciting to see the tremendous progress on the continent. And in my case, I can specifically speak about Zimbabwe, that we continue to see the development in terms of fiber. I happen to have the opportunity to travel throughout the country, and you can see fiber being dug right through the country. So we hope some of these frustrations that I have mentioned are ones that will be less of a frustration as we go forward. But so I think that's been probably my biggest just adjustment in terms of coming back.
And since you lived in the US for such a long time, and I guess you were also planning the move far in advance to actually moving, you must have had a lot of expectations for moving back to Africa. So coming back to the continent, was it like what you anticipated ahead of time?
You know, Marcus, I would say yes and no. And maybe let me start with what my expectations were. And I would say the expectations of things I really thought would work the way they did, and they have. I think in many ways, we are living in an environment where people are really excited about technology. I mean, the rates and adoption of technology in Africa and in Zimbabwe is quite tremendous. When you look at just even the mobile penetration rates, we anticipate that in 2012 we'll be at 100% penetration rate, meaning that almost every person within the country will have a mobile device. So I knew for a fact that there would be this tremendous thirst for knowledge and technology, coming back, and I have not seen any signs of slowing down. I mentioned about the fiber that's being put in the ground, but also some of the most innovative solutions are coming up. We're having competitions that are being run by several organizations to encourage entrepreneurship, and it's a very different way of looking at employment. So we have a lot of startup companies who are looking at executing on their ideas. So in many ways, that was an expectation that I have not been disappointed about. I think one aspect that's probably been less so of sort of, maybe I'd say not meeting my expectations, but more or less being surprised about, is just in many cases just some of the simple challenges of as a business opening up bank accounts or trying to find information. I think the lack of information can be very frustrating when you come from the more developed countries, and indeed this is an opportunity. I mean, if you look at just the whole process of opening up a bank account, the number of forms you have to fill out, in some cases the number of different buildings you have to go through just to be able to get some of this information together is quite shocking. But those are the growing pains, and I would say that that has been surprising in terms of just being able to provide and have the ability to have access to information readily available. That's been that's been an interesting process to go through.
Hmm. All right, let's shift over to our topic for the day, and that's our own operations in Africa. So it's about 3 months after we did the first podcast episode for about what we were planning for Africa and where we're at there. And naturally, a lot has happened since then. So could you offer a short recap for our audience in terms of what we've done and what milestones we've met in Africa till this day?
Yeah, sure. I would say the biggest milestone, and we are very, very excited about this because, we did our first podcast, as we mentioned a few months ago, and we got an overwhelming response. We still continue to get emails about that podcast. And so it really goes back to the thirst of knowledge about entrepreneurship on the continent. Again, Africa is a big, big continent. We have quite a lot of ground to cover. But what we did as a team is we collectively made some strategic decisions about which countries to start to roll out our presence. And we, in many ways, are a global organization, but we are very local in thought and in involvement. And what I mean by that is that we clearly understand that every country, even within Africa, has its needs, it has its different challenges, it has its different opportunities. And so what we did is we really looked at a few countries that we felt were very important for us to really expand our presence. And some of those countries include Egypt, South Africa, Kenya. For me, Zimbabwe was strategic because that's where I'm located. And Nigeria is another country that we felt we needed to really continue to expand our presence. And to date, we are very fortunate to have had some team members who are part of the GrowVC team. We have Matia Mandela, who's joined us, who now is part of our East Africa business development efforts, and he's based out of Kenya. And Kenya is a very exciting market for Africa in general. We also have Spencer Mparutsa, who has joined us and who works out of South Africa. So our strategy has really been to focus on countries that have a framework that allows Growth VC to continue to expand and really allow us to create an environment that really is conducive for entrepreneurs to thrive, to be able to post their ideas and register on the website and put up their pictures and continue to use that tool, a fantastic platform to be able to promote their businesses. So we're really excited about having our team, and we'll continue to grow in countries where we feel that it will give us our continued momentum. And let me comment on that, Marcus, is that there is no discrimination in any way in terms of all the other African countries. We get responses from entrepreneurs in Uganda and Cameroon, and so we look at Africa as a huge opportunity. But because of the limited resources and like any other businesses, there has to be a focus on some key markets. So we'd love to be in every single country in Africa in the future, and I'm sure we'll get there. But we've been very careful about how and where we expand. So that's been certainly a very, very exciting time for us in terms of our growth. And we've also seen over 60% increase in the number of what I call unique visitors who are coming to the Growth VC website from Africa. and they are spending an average of 18